Hello from Castle Goring, from Mickey and from me, and the Whuppies. Several people have asked if I could show the Whuppies, and I am going to show them because they are growing like topsy. I mean, this is one of the daughters. Isn't she adorable? And look at how big she is. This is the other daughter, who we're going to be calling Aurora. And isn't she big as well? Yes, you sweet little thing, you. And this is Mr. Diesel. Mr. Diesel has been named by his daddy already. Haven't you, Mr. Diesel? Yes, you have. Sweetness and light. And today, the theme, at least the main theme, is going to be birth, reproduction, and the accidents of birth. And if we manage to get through this subject, we will have rather lighter fare as well. But I thought that we can link the birth of these beautiful babies with other possible births and the accidents of birth. So without further ado, I am going to take the puppies away so that they're not distracting me. And then I am going to come back and plunge right in with the theme of the day. Mix? Let's go, honey. Come on, let's go. Come. Aren't they just adorable? Well, now to settle into rather more serious matters and rather less life-enhancing, I suppose you could say, matters. Several people have asked me to comment on what I have been told about Meghan's identity. Now, I make the point that I have been careful not to ask her father, whom I have never met or spoken to, I hasten to add, or any other member of the Markle family, including those I know, about this subject. I do know, and I'm going to be choosing my words very carefully throughout the whole of this passage, so to speak. There have been rumours circulating that I thought I'd knocked on the head, that Meghan was transsexual. I didn't think it was likely that she would be transsexual because my research from when I did the book was that she had been brought up as a girl from birth. So I didn't see how she could be a transsexual. However, on the premise that you should leave no stone unturned, I asked a member of the family who said absolutely not. She was brought up as a girl from the word go. And I know a lot of people think that she wasn't born in 1981, but to date, my researches indicate that she was born in 1981. Now, I could be wrong, and I can be wrong about all of this. And I need to emphasize that for legal reasons as well. But evidently, when Meghan was a teenager, And this is something that was told to me by someone who knew her when she was growing up and knew her very well. And I hasten to add, it's not a member of the family. And I have been scrupulous in making sure I'm not asking any member of the family, because I think there are certain confidences that should never be betrayed under any circumstances. And no matter how appalling Meghan's behaviour has been, I do not think that I should put her father or anybody else close to her in the frame to out her. Because according to the information I received, and I emphasize, Meghan could have made it up. The person who told me could have made it up, although I don't think they did. Meghan could have been trying to be interesting as a teenager, but equally, she could have been imparting the facts. I mean, okay, we all know Meghan is a drama queen and that she'll do anything to grab attention. And to put it in context, I will say, a few months ago, I was at an event with friends of mine, one of whom is a very beautiful woman. And she announced to all and sundry, apropos of nothing, that she was a transsexual. Another friend of mine who was there said to me afterwards, he said, "Did you hear blah, blah, blah say da, da, da? And could it be true?" I said, "I have absolutely no idea." I said, "I don't think it's true, but," I said, "who knows? I mean, anything is possible, even if not everything is likely." I said, "Oh," so he said to me, "Would you please find out?" Which I did. And she'd just been saying it to be droll and entertaining and sort of make waves and stir the pot, if I may mix my metaphors. It is possible that Meghan was stirring the pot and making waves. It is also possible that what she said happened. And this is what I was told. That Meghan discovered as a teenager, when she didn't have her menses, and they took her to the doctor, that she was intersex. Now, the person who told me that she told them this, and I hate to have to be ungrammatical, but I'm not giving away the sex of the person because I don't intend to give away their identity. And I am sure that Meghan will be racking her brains thinking who she said what to, and I'm not assisting her in her quest because she said it. And she was evidently pretty traumatized, as one would be, to discover that she was intersex. Now, to divert slightly, a few years ago, it must have been about 5 or so years ago, I was asked to lecture at a symposium at Cambridge University with 1 or 2 other people on the subject of intersex. I really didn't want to do it, but I felt it was my duty to do it, so I did it. It is a subject that anybody who has, well, let me put it this way. If you've been to hell, you don't want to go back there. And nevertheless, I lectured, and one of the girls who lectured, it was a girl as well and a guy, and he, lovely young man, he's actually received quite a lot of publicity. The medical profession was chopping and changing with him. So he was assigned one gender, then he was assigned another, chop, chop, change, change. And his name is Joe, and he's a marvellous, marvellous young man. Kind, decent, humane, just what you would expect from somebody who has been through hell and come out the other side. The girl who lectured, and I'm not going to mention her name, her surname is very eminent. When she was 15 years old, they thought she had ovarian cancer. And when they opened her up, they discovered that she was androgen insensitive. She had XY chromosomes. Beautiful girl. She suffered from a phenomenon called androgen insensitive syndrome. And she suffered from complete androgen insensitive syndrome, which meant that in the womb, as you know, every baby starts out being effectively neutral and then becomes female or has male characteristics. Babies that are, fetuses I should say, that are androgen insensitive, even though they have XY chromosomes, if they are completely androgen insensitive, they develop and present as perfectly normal girls. And this girl presented as a perfectly normal girl. You would never have thought in a month of Sundays that she was anything but 110% female. Well, of course, it was a tremendous shock to her and the family, and the way it was handled by the doctors drove her to a nervous breakdown. She came out the other side, but the whole thing was needlessly traumatic, as it often and usually is. I say all of this because if Meghan was not making herself yet again, so boring, and boring people have to make themselves interesting with embroidery. If she wasn't making herself interesting, it would have been a tremendous trauma to discover that she was intersex. Now, she might not, presumably, I'm guessing now, and I'm not an expert on the subject, because it's a very nuanced subject with many different byways and highways and cul-de-sacs. And you really have to be an expert on the subject, and I'm certainly not, and quite frankly, I don't want to be. My knowledge of it has been rather more than I would have wanted. Full stop. Many of you might know I was misgendered at birth. Now, my situation was completely different from any situation that Meghan might have found herself in, because Meghan wasn't misgendered at birth. And XYC complete androgen insensitive syndrome females are not misgendered at birth, and they usually remain in the female gender because they have no sensitivity towards androgen, which is the male hormone. So they are hyper feminine very often. And in fact, many years ago, there was a very good program on LA Law or CSI or one of them about a girl who was androgen insensitive. And the narrative was that she was so flooded with estrogen that she was the most devious, manipulative. I thought this must have been written by men. But anyway, the point I'm making is that Meghan was brought up as a girl from the word go. She could have been biologically female. She could have been XX. If indeed any of this is true, again, I hasten to add, she could have been XXY. She could have been XY. If she was XY and had complete androgen insensitive syndrome, she would have not only presented as hyperfeminine, but one or two of the characteristics that she possesses might not have been existent. Now, there are other categorizations. Partial, so she could have been partial androgen insensitive syndrome, or she could have been mild androgen insensitive syndrome. If she were going to be anything, I would have thought it was going to be nearly complete, but not complete, because this girl I was telling you about at Cambridge, who gave this lecture, who was so completely mistreated by the medical profession that it drove her to a nervous breakdown. She had very small hands and feet. Meghan doesn't have small feet. Now, many women have big hands and feet, and Meghan could come from a family that has big hands and feet. I mean, I don't exactly have the smallest hands and feet, but my hands and feet are the exact same size as my Aunt Marjorie, my mother's sister, who was my exact height. My mother also didn't have small hands because I inherited her rings, or some of them, and never had to get them adjusted. So the point I'm making is that in certain families, but my mother incidentally had very small feet, not small hands, but small feet. But her sister had relatively not small, but not particularly big hands and feet. I just make all of these distinctions so that on the scant knowledge that I would possess, and that in fact Meghan would have possessed at the time, because this would have been 24, 25 years ago. and much less was known on the subject than is known now. I mean, a certain amount was known, but not that much, because I mean, when I was born, nobody knew anything about any of this sort of stuff. And it was only in the 1950s that people began to, the medical profession, I should say, began to discover about the ins and outs of these sort of situations. But it's a lot more common than people would realize, all of these situations, because I personally know two separate families that had an intersex child. And how rare can it be if one knows two completely separate families that ended up with the problem? The point of all of this is, if it is true, and I hope it's not, because Meghan would be the worst poster child for any form of intersexuality. It is already a subject that attracts ghoulish attention, degrees of sensationalism, distasteful curiosity, a degree of prejudice that is discomforting because some people have no confidence in their own gender and or sexuality and confuse the two. That she would be, in my opinion, the worst poster child, as I just said, for the condition. However, if she was androgen insensitive, she would be XY. She would have been born without ovaries and without a womb. She would therefore, unless she had a womb transplant, and I'm being very careful to be overly generous in this situation, she would not have been able to bear children. Of course, if she had been androgen insensitive and didn't want anybody to know about it, the likelihood is she wouldn't have to tell anybody, because they wouldn't necessarily find out. I think it's always a big mistake to not come clean about your difficulties, shall we say, especially when you're getting married to someone or are married to someone. But there are stories that have circulated that she made Trevor Engelson agree that she would never get pregnant. That gilds the lily discomfortingly. I can sympathize with her if she were born with this problem and it's resolved, which it usually is resolved surgically, because they usually have perfectly normal external organs, but the internal organs might need a little bit of, shall we say, deepening. And then she would be, to all intents and purposes, a perfectly normal, functional female, but incapable of having children. Now, if she had been XX with some anomaly, she could possibly have got pregnant and maybe not been able to carry the child to full term or whatever, because the subject is so confusing and so nuanced, and there are so many possibilities that one doesn't want to restrict any possibility. But if she were, and it's off what she said and what this person told me she said, it would appear that she was partial, more than partial, but not complete androgen insensitive syndrome, which would have meant that she could not bear or carry children. Now, let us put ourselves in the position of someone like that. And as I say, this is all speculative, hypothetical, and none of it may actually be so. Nevertheless, if you put yourself in her shoes, or let's put it this way, put yourself in the shoes of any woman any girl who discovers as a teenager that she is got this problem, and that some people would regard her as a man. I mean, in fact, what happened with this lovely girl who lectured with me and what drove her to a nervous breakdown was one of the doctors telling her she was a man. She wasn't a man. It is known as an XY complete androgen insensitive syndrome female. So she was never a man. But 25 years ago, that is the sort of thing that would have happened and could have happened. And it would have been absolutely shattering for any young girl who believes she's perfectly normal to discover not only that she's not normal, but that some people regard her as a man, and she's not a man, and she doesn't want to be a man, and she doesn't regard herself as a man. So I think we need to sympathize and be compassionate, that word that she so misuses. But I think in this case, we can and should be compassionate. She gets married and she wants children, and the children stand a chance of inheriting a throne. I think one can understand, not agree with, but one can understand why anybody in that situation who has certain feelings and certain not always constructive feelings and not always positive attitudes, but who has made a success of her life by breaking rules, ignoring rules, and who knows, has felt entitled to do so because she has been embittered by what nature did to her, and maybe experiences with misunderstanding medical people and maybe misunderstanding friends. I'm just speculating. I'm not saying this is what happened, I'm just speculating. Because if you're being compassionate, you need to imagine all the possibilities. And also, this is sort of relates to my parents-in-law and the matter of the Argyle versus Argyle bastardy case of 1958-59, when my father-in-law, who believed, most likely erroneously, that his two sons were not fathered by him, and tried to get his then wife to go along with a plan he had to get them delegitimized, and that she and he would then have a baby, an heir to the dukedom. The problem being that she couldn't have any more children. So he came up with the plan that she would buy a baby in Poland, and she would pad herself, and this incidentally is touched upon in a very British scandal, the 3-part BBC television series, or no, it was ITV television series that was done over the Christmas season on my parents-in-law notorious divorce. But the point I'm making is, it's not that out of the realms of thinking that when you stand to inherit a dukedom or a kingdom, or you're in line to do it, that you would stuff with cotton what God has forgotten, sort of thing. I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying you should do it, but I'm saying we need to put ourselves in the shoes of people who think, well, and I'm not saying, incidentally, that Meghan did any of this, but there has been speculation all along that the children are the products of surrogacy, and that Meghan needed to feel what it was like to be pregnant, and therefore presented as if she were pregnant when she wasn't. I'm not saying she did it, I'm saying there is speculation that she did it. There's also the possibility that just as how she might have been playing with this friend and inventing all of that story, she could have been playing with the public and the variable size of her belly during pregnancy, because it's the only woman I can think of who had such variable, and sometimes immediately variable, bumps throughout a pregnancy. Really quite astonishing. But if she was, as she told this person, intersex, it all begins to make sense. Maybe not desirable, in fact, definitely not desirable, but understandable. Of course, if this were so, it would open up all sorts of cans of worms in terms of identity of the children, legitimacy of the children, rights of succession of the children. All of which have been Damocletian swords hanging over various elements of the royal family for some considerable length of time. But if any of this is so, and I am not for a second saying it is, I am merely speculating as a result of what I was told Meghan told somebody when she was a teenager and certainly appeared to be very traumatized. Maybe she was an actress even then. Maybe she was a better actress then than she has been since then. Who knows? Who knows? Of course, who would know would be her father. And I'm sure at this point, her sister as well. But I would not ask them because I would not wish for them to be outing her in this situation. Of course, if she keeps on trashing them and it turns out that they know about this or any other subject that they can elucidate upon, at that point, well, you know, if it's my skin or yours, it better be mine that I choose. And I wouldn't blame them at that point for outing her, if indeed any of this is true, which I sincerely hope it's not. I sincerely hope that this is all, for all I know, games being played, maybe even by Meghan herself, then and now. It's quite possible. I mean, you know, the number of truths that she has told, the number of confessions that she has made, the truth bombs that she has discharged on the world. Oh, you know, H and I were married 3 days before we were married by the Archbishop. Yeah, we were, weren't we, H? Yes, yes. Who knows? Anyway, I just throw it out there for what it's worth. And hopefully at some point, somebody will get to the bottom of what has really gone on. Or maybe we are already at the bottom of what has gone on. And maybe it's just one lie after another. One act of embroidery after another. One scenario invented after another to keep them in the public eye. Maybe it's nothing to do with intersexuality. Maybe it's everything to do with gluttony for attention. Who knows? I need to be careful what I say. I need to be careful how I convey things. I don't want to be unfair to anybody, and I'm certainly not giving people whose characters have been so plainly undesirable a knife with which to stab me. So, on that note, I will say, I hope this has been of some interest to you. If it has, please like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, And please keep the questions coming in. Remember, this can't be done without you. God bless and goodbye.